Welcome the anointed ones. The best revenge, not being like them. Marcus Aurelius. But let's be honest, outliving their nonsense with style, that's just delicious. Let me tell you something that the manipulators, the saboteurs, the smiling backstabbers never want to admit. They never actually planned for you to last. They were counting on your collapse, and they were so sure their dirty tactics would bury you, they forgot one fatal flaw in their entire strategy. You weren't playing checkers. You were building a legacy. You see, according to a psychological study from the University of Michigan, people who rely on deceit and manipulation over time suffer higher levels of chronic anxiety and identity erosion. Translation: the very people who tried to destroy you were destroying themselves in real time, and all you had to do was outlive the lie. They played dirty. You played different, smarter, quieter, deadlier. While they were busy gossiping in the group chat, you were busy building in the shadows. They underestimated you so badly they thought your silence was defeat, when in fact, it was strategy. You weren't losing, you were loading. And let's be honest, you could have clapped back. You could have exposed them. But no, you hit them with the move they never saw coming. You healed, you elevated, you prospered. Now they're left clapping at your downfall that never arrived. So buckle up, because this isn't just a story about survival. This is a masterclass in how to flip the entire game without even flipping the table. Let's get into the 14 mind-blowing truths about how you didn't just survive. You outplayed, outpaced, and outlasted everyone who bet against you. And trust me, by the end of this, you'll understand. Smarts age well. Petty doesn't. Number 1, you let them think they were winning. That was the checkmate move. You let them think they were winning, and that move alone dismantled their entire game without them even realizing it. They mistook your calm for cluelessness. They saw your silence and thought you were sleeping. But the truth is, you were watching. You were analyzing. You were letting them get loud while you got lethal, with knowledge, strategy, and patience. See, people who play dirty need an audience. They feed on reactions. They need to feel in control because without it, their identity crumbles. So you did something brilliant. You stepped back and gave them the stage. You let them perform. You let them celebrate fake victories. And while they were doing all that, you were quietly preparing the kind of comeback they could never block. They thought they broke you when, really, you just stopped explaining yourself. They thought they defeated you when all you did was change direction. You let them laugh first because you knew something they didn't. That this wasn't a race, it was a timeline test. You knew how to pace yourself. You knew how to play for legacy, not for noise. The funny thing is, your silence made them confident, and that confidence made them sloppy. They started exposing themselves. They revealed too much. They tried to get flashy with lies, petty moves, and sabotage, thinking you were too far gone to fight back. But you weren't gone. You were evolving. They didn't know your best move was never about getting even. It was about lasting longer. You let their ego do all the damage. You didn't have to attack. All you had to do was stand still and let their own fire burn them out. That's the power of knowing your value. When you're really built different, you don't play loud. You play long. You let them feel like they won, only to realize later the game wasn't over. You were just 2 steps ahead the entire time. Number 2, you chose reputation over reaction. And that choice broke their playbook. They baited you to self-destruct, and you knew it. Every move they made was meant to trigger you into reacting, into snapping, into proving their lies right. They wanted you to lose your cool so they could point and say, "See? Told you they were the problem." But you saw the setup. You read the energy. And instead of reacting, you chose something they couldn't understand. You chose to protect your reputation, not your pride. They were loud, messy, and dramatic on purpose. They needed chaos because chaos hides the truth. But you didn't fall for it. You let them throw their shade, spread their rumors, twist your words. You didn't jump into the mud with them, because you knew that mud stains, even if you're innocent. You made the harder choice. You stayed quiet, you stayed clean, and you stayed focused. What they didn't expect was for you to value your name more than your feelings. You weren't trying to win arguments. You were trying to walk away with your soul intact. That's why they're still circling the same drama, still trying to get people on their side, still hoping for a reaction. But you moved on. You moved up. And now they're stuck arguing with ghosts because you're not even in the room anymore. They don't know how to fight someone who doesn't play dirty. Your refusal to stoop down confused them. It embarrassed them. Because deep down, they knew if you ever told the full truth, their entire image would fall apart. And yet you stayed quiet. Not because you were scared, but because you were wise enough to know that dignity will always outlive drama. And now, your name holds weight, and theirs holds warnings. Your silence didn't destroy you, it preserved you. You didn't just win, you walked away with something they'll never have: peace, power, and a clean conscience. Number 3, you understood that outlasting isn't about time. It's about transformation. They thought they were draining your energy, but you were evolving the whole time. That's the part that messed them up. They believed time was on their side, that the longer they kept you under pressure, the more likely you'd break down. But you weren't breaking, you were breaking through. What they didn't understand is that outlasting someone isn't about just surviving more days. It's about who you become during those days. They stayed the same. They used the same tired tactics, the same mind games, the same gossip. Meanwhile, you were growing, not just emotionally, but spiritually, mentally, and in how you saw yourself. You were leveling up in silence. Every lie they told, every move they made pushed you deeper into your transformation. They tried to destroy you with delay, but that delay gave you depth. That's what made you dangerous. You didn't just stay alive, you came out smarter, stronger, and more aligned. While they were stuck in a loop trying to control the story, you were outgrowing the entire chapter. They thought they paused your progress, but all they did was give you the time to figure out who you really are. And that's a threat they never prepared for. People like that play short games. They think quick wins mean long-term power. But you weren't in it for quick. You were in it for real. So you used the time. You healed. You studied. You unlearned the lies they planted and found the truth about yourself. And when you finally stepped out of that process, you weren't just someone who made it, you were someone they couldn't even recognize. That's the difference. They wanted to survive the moment. You were preparing to own the future. Outlasting them wasn't just about time. It was about who you became while they stayed the same. And now they're watching you live a life they tried to block, knowing deep down, you didn't just survive them, you outgrew them. Number 4, you didn't outperform them. You outsourced their power by refusing to play their game. You didn't beat them at their game. You walked off the board and made the whole game irrelevant. That was the move that broke them. They were counting on you to stay locked in the same toxic loop they lived for. Constant back and forth, competition, petty energy, mind games. That's their habitat. That's what they know. But instead of playing harder, you simply stopped playing at all. And that's when everything they built started to collapse. They didn't have real power. They only had control when you participated. Their drama needed your reaction. Their manipulation needed your trust. Their lies needed your defense. But when you unplugged from it all, their power dried up. You weren't trying to prove yourself anymore because you realized something critical. You don't have to fight for a seat at a corrupt table when you can build your own house. You stopped trying to be liked by people who twisted everything good into something suspicious. You stopped explaining your intentions to people who were committed to misunderstanding you. That choice? That was the strategy. It wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy, but it was lethal. You shut down the supply chain of attention, access, and energy that kept them feeling superior. And when you took that away, they had nothing left to perform for. That's why they hate your peace. Your refusal to engage forced them to face their own emptiness. Without you reacting, chasing, defending, or explaining, the spotlight dimmed. The applause stopped. Their storyline fell apart. And it drove them crazy because deep down, they knew you didn't need to beat them. You just needed to be done with them. You didn't need revenge. You needed distance, and that distance stripped them of the only power they ever had, your energy. That's how you won. Not by overpowering them, but by making them irrelevant. Number 5, You studied the shadow without becoming it. You didn't just survive the darkness, you studied it. You stood in the middle of manipulation, envy, betrayal, and cruelty, and instead of becoming bitter or twisted like the ones who came for you, you made yourself a mirror. You watched how they moved. You saw how lies were crafted, how reputations were ruined with whispers, how people smiled while secretly hoping to see you fall. But instead of copying them, you took notes. You became aware. And that awareness turned into strength. They became what they feared. In order to win, they let go of who they were. They gave up authenticity for image, traded truth for control, and chose the path of shortcuts and shadows. But you didn't. You chose to stay rooted in who you are, even when it cost you relationships, even when it made the journey lonelier, even when being the bigger person felt like swallowing glass. That's what makes your power so dangerous. It's not just raw, it's refined. It's been tested in fire without turning to ash. You saw the worst in people. You were lied on, sabotaged, underestimated, and sometimes even betrayed by those you loved. And yet you didn't let those experiences reshape your heart into something ugly. You didn't become cynical or cold. You just became wise. And with that wisdom, you learned how to protect your peace without becoming paranoid. You learned how to detect fakeness without becoming fake. You learned how to spot a snake without becoming one. That's why they can't figure you out. You understand how darkness works, but you don't need it to win. They were hoping the pain would corrupt you, that the bitterness would infect you, but it didn't. You transmuted it. You turned it into discernment, depth, and resilience. You became unbreakable, not because you were immune to evil, but because you refused to reflect it. You didn't become like them. You became better. Number 6. You let time build the case. They tried to fake. They rushed to paint you as the villain while you were still in the process of healing. They didn't wait for facts. They fabricated them. They twisted your silence into guilt, your growth into arrogance, your boundaries into betrayal. But you didn't take the bait. You didn't panic. You didn't fight to clear your name in every room where it was dragged. You let time do what gossip never can. Reveal the truth with no effort, no spin, no performance. They had to lie because they couldn't compete with your reality. Their story was flashy but flimsy. It needed updates, attention, and backup. Your story didn't. You just kept living. You stayed consistent. You didn't need to run around collecting receipts. Your character was the receipt. Your life became the proof. And over time, while their version of events fell apart under its own weight, your truth just kept standing. Time has a way of testing everything. People forget that. It exposes what's fake and magnifies what's real. And when the dust settled, people started to notice. The ones who once believed the noise started seeing the pattern. They saw you never had to defend yourself because your life was doing that for you. They saw that everything they tried to say about you didn't match who you continued to be. They underestimated how powerful it is to keep your hands clean. You didn't have to clap back. You didn't have to match their low blows. You just had to outlast the lie. And you did. Now the same mouths that lied on you are quiet. The same people who fed into the chaos are starting to question what really happened. Because nothing artificial survives time. But truth gets stronger with age. You didn't just win, you let the truth marinate. You let integrity speak louder than impulse. And now they can't undo what time has already exposed. You were real, and they were reaching. Number 7. You weren't trying to be right. You were becoming aligned. While they were busy trying to be seen as the one who won, you were focused on something they didn't even understand: alignment. You weren't arguing to prove a point. You weren't bending yourself into approval just to be accepted. You were getting your soul in order. You were unlearning the noise, confronting your wounds, and making decisions that felt right deep in your spirit, not just good on paper. They craved validation like oxygen. They needed to be right, even if it meant lying, manipulating, or tearing others down to protect their image. Everything was a performance. They had to look good, sound good, and spin the narrative so they never looked like the villain. But you? You were more concerned with being whole than looking perfect. That's what shook them. You weren't afraid to look wrong. if it meant choosing what was real. You didn't need the crowd to clap, you needed to sleep at night. You needed to feel clean after walking away from the chaos. While they tried to control the perception, you were cleansing the inner world. You were doing the quiet, gritty work of healing and aligning with your purpose. That's why you glow now. Not because everything went perfect, but because you stopped fighting for false acceptance and started flowing with truth. They're exhausted because image maintenance is a full-time job. It's heavy to keep pretending. But you're light now. You're centered. You don't need to be invited to their tables or spoken about in their circles. You've got something more powerful, inner clarity. You know who you are and what you're not willing to compromise anymore. And that's the real win. You didn't chase the spotlight. You became the light. You didn't need to be right in every conversation. You needed to be at peace in your own skin. And while they're still performing, still curating, still needing to be seen a certain way, you're simply living, whole, grounded, free. Number 8. You weaponized their underestimation. They saw your quiet moments as weakness and misread your patience as fear, and you let them. You kept your moves small, your profile low, your victories private. Every time they rolled their eyes at you, you filed away a new piece of intel. When they whispered that you weren't a threat, that rumor became your camouflage. You didn't push back, because pushing would have warned them. Instead, you collected their tells the way a chess master studies openings, silent, steady, noting which piece they moved first and how fast they burned their own energy. They bragged, you listened. They showed off, you mapped blind spots. They laughed at your silence, never realizing silence was the trap door beneath their own feet. Underestimation breeds carelessness, and carelessness leaves fingerprints. So they left them everywhere. Sloppy shortcuts, inflated egos, alliances held together with gossip. You stood in the corner nodding, playing harmless, letting them think your absence from the spotlight meant absence of skill. Meanwhile, you were sharpening the very tools they mocked you for not having. By the time they noticed you'd quietly outgrown every box they tried to keep you in, the exit was barred behind them, blocked not by revenge, but by the natural consequence of their arrogance. Their biggest error wasn't the ambush, it was the victory parade they threw too soon. They stopped innovating because they thought they'd already won. You never stopped improving because you knew the real match hadn't even started. That asymmetry, your growth versus their stagnation, was the checkmate they never saw. And when the board finally cleared, you didn't need to roar. You just revealed the positions they'd overlooked, the advantages they'd gifted you, the doors they'd left unlocked. They were beaten by their own certainty. You won by leveraging the simplest, deadliest truth in every battlefield. The quiet one is learning. By the time they understood that, the game they designed to break you was already flipped, and weak was the story they had written about themselves. Number 9. You mastered the art of silent elevation. You didn't broadcast your rise, you became your rise. No flashy announcements, no need to prove a point. You let them keep watching the old version of you while you quietly reinvented everything they thought they had control over. That's what threw them off. They were too busy monitoring your reactions, waiting for signs of struggle, gossiping about who you used to be. Meanwhile, you were vanishing from their radar, mentally, emotionally, even spiritually, and stepping into rooms they didn't know existed. You understood something they never did. True elevation doesn't scream, it moves. And it moves in silence because silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. You upgraded in spaces they couldn't infect. You healed in solitude, grew in hidden places, and worked in dimensions their drama couldn't penetrate. By the time they realized you were no longer affected by their tactics, you weren't just out of their reach, you were out of their league. They kept attacking where you used to be, not realizing you had already shifted. That's the power of silent elevation. Their aim becomes useless. Their manipulation hits walls. Their name-dropping and storytelling sound outdated. They're still fighting you like you're in the same emotional zip code, but you've moved, internally and externally. You outgrew the battlefield so thoroughly that the war no longer applies to you. And what's most painful to them is they can't claim credit for your glow-up. They can't say they inspired it, taught it, or helped it, Because while they tried to distract you with chaos, you focused on becoming untouchable. And now they're left swinging at a ghost, bitter, confused, and exposed. Your silence wasn't retreat, it was recalibration. You didn't disappear because you lost. You disappeared because you leveled up. Now they're stuck watching you win from a distance, trying to figure out how someone they thought they had cornered became someone they can't even contact. Number 10. You turned betrayal into blueprint. Betrayal hit like a punch to the gut, sharp, unexpected, and the kind of pain that could have broken you. But you didn't let it. Instead of drowning in anger or despair, you treated every stab like a data point, a clue in a bigger puzzle. You dissected every motive, every whispered lie, every sudden cold shoulder. You learned to see through the masks people wore, understanding not just what they did, but why they did it. This wasn't just survival. It was deep analysis. Where most people crumble, replaying the hurt or trying to get revenge, you flipped the script. You didn't waste energy reacting to their games. You got smarter. You spotted the recurring themes, the same patterns of manipulation, the familiar fears they projected onto you, the cracks in their armor. That knowledge became your blueprint. You began anticipating their moves before they even made them. You learned where to hold firm and where to let go, what battles were worth fighting and which ones would only trap you in endless cycles. They kept playing the same old cards, stuck in loops of drama and deceit, while you used their chaos as a workshop for your growth. Every betrayal was a lesson, every heartbreak a masterclass in strategy. You weren't just surviving, you were evolving. Their attempts to break you only revealed their own weaknesses and gave you tools to build your new reality. That's why they keep getting lost in the past, dragging old grudges like heavy chains while you're stepping forward, blueprint in hand, creating a future that's out of their reach. They're trapped in yesterday's mistakes, but you're designing tomorrow's victories. You turned what was meant to shatter you into the foundation for your rise, and that makes all the difference. Number 11. You played the long game in a culture addicted to fast victories. In a world obsessed with instant gratification and quick wins, you chose a path that most don't even see. While everyone else was sprinting toward the next headline, the next viral moment, or the next hollow applause, you were quietly building something that lasts. You weren't interested in a flash-in-the-pan kind of success that fades the second the spotlight moves on. You were after depth, meaning and impact that could withstand time and trial. They hustled for likes and shares, measuring worth by numbers that disappear the next day. You measured by growth. Slow, steady, deliberate growth that no algorithm could fake or erase. They needed the spotlight. You needed substance. They craved approval. You craved alignment. And in a culture where everything is disposable, you made your foundation unbreakable. That's what makes your rise so frustrating to them. They want the quick win, the viral moment that boosts their ego and then vanishes. But you're playing chess while they're playing checkers. Your moves aren't designed for applause. They're designed for legacy. Every setback was a setup. Every delay was a chance to refine your vision. Every moment of silence was preparation for the roar. By the time they realize you're succeeding on a level they can't reach, it's too late. They've burned out chasing approval that never satisfied while you're just getting started. Their short game left them empty, but your long game gave you roots. Deep, strong roots that no storm can pull up. You didn't just play to win, you played to endure. You became vital, not viral. And that's a power they'll never understand until they see how far you've already gone. Miles ahead, fueled by patience, wisdom, and a vision no momentary trend can ever steal. Number 12. You didn't hide your scars, you used them to set traps. You didn't cover up your scars with pretty stories or fake smiles. Instead, you wore them openly, like a map of every battle you survived. You didn't hide the pain because you knew that pretending to be flawless only feeds their hunger to break you. Showing your scars wasn't weakness. It was a signal that said, I've been through this, and I'm still standing. But here's the twist they didn't expect. Those scars weren't just proof of survival, they were bait. Every time they tried to poke at your vulnerabilities, they revealed their own true nature. Their reactions, their desperation to exploit what they thought was your breaking point. Those moments exposed their real intentions and weaknesses. You studied those reactions carefully, like a hunter reading tracks in the forest. Each emotional trigger they hit, each lie they told, was a step deeper into the trap you set, without them even knowing. They thought they had you figured out because they saw the wounds. But what they missed was the strategy behind exposing them. You weren't just surviving pain. You were using it to navigate the maze they constructed to trap you. Their ignorance became your advantage. Their attacks gave you clues, and their underestimation was the bait that led them right into your trap. By the time they realized you were using your scars as a guide and a weapon, it was already too late. You'd turned their efforts to break you into the very tools that led you out of the darkness they tried to trap you in. Your pain didn't make you vulnerable, it made you invisible, untouchable, and ultimately victorious. Number 13. You let the fire consume what was never meant to stay. They threw you into the fire expecting you to burn, expecting you to break down and disappear. But you didn't just stand your ground, you surrendered to the flames in a way they never understood. You didn't waste time fighting what was meant to go. You let the fire consume the old versions of yourself that no longer served your purpose. The doubts, the fears, the toxic ties, and the false loyalties. Instead of fearing the burn, you saw it as a purifier. The fire wasn't an enemy. It was a tool, one that stripped away everything superficial, leaving only what was real and resilient. What they aimed to destroy was exactly what needed to be erased. And what remained wasn't weak. It was refined steel, sharper and stronger than before. They wanted to watch you crumble, but all they saw was you walking out cleaner, lighter, and more powerful than they ever imagined possible. Their fire didn't break you. It built you. It carved out space for growth, for clarity, and for a future they never predicted. You didn't just survive their attempts to scorch you, you emerged forged, pure in your purpose, unshakable in your spirit, and ready to own everything they tried to take away. The fire took what was never meant to stay, and in return, it gave you a rebirth. That's why now, when they look at you, they see something they can't touch. A force that was made in the flames, not broken by them. Number 14. You didn't win because you were better. You won because you were willing to be still while they self-destructed. The victory wasn't earned by outshining them in noisy battles or flashy moves. It came from something far quieter and far more powerful, your ability to simply be while they unraveled. You didn't rush to prove yourself or engage in their drama. Instead, you stayed calm, steady, and unshaken. While they were busy spinning out of control, caught in their own rage, lies, and desperation, you held your ground with a stillness that was impossible to ignore. Their chaos was their own undoing. Every reckless word, every impulsive action, every moment of overreach peeled back the mask they wore. They exposed their true selves not because you forced it, but because they couldn't help it. Their unraveling became a slow-motion self-destruction, a display of weakness, insecurity, and poor character, all on full view. And you, by simply enduring and refusing to engage, became the silent witness to their collapse. You didn't need to throw punches or strike back, you only needed patience and presence. The battlefield you were on wasn't one of noise, but of time. Your refusal to react was your greatest weapon. You allowed them to drain their own energy, burn their own bridges, and lose their own credibility. And when they finally reached the end of their own making, there you were, standing steady, untouched by the storm they created. That kind of win doesn't come from being better in the traditional sense. It comes from knowing when to act and when to stay still. You didn't destroy them, you survived long enough for their own destruction to do the work for you. That's the real power, not in fighting, but in enduring, watching, and outlasting. They played their games thinking the rules were theirs to write, but you proved that the ultimate power lies in patience, wisdom, and quiet strength. You didn't need to meet their chaos with chaos, their lies with lies, or their fury with fury. Instead, you chose a path few dare to walk, a path of resilience so deep that it turned every attack into fuel, every scar into a guide, and every moment of doubt into a stepping stone. You outlasted them not because you were louder or faster, but because you understood the game at a level they never could. You moved with intention. You endured with grace. and you rose with a force that can't be shaken or replicated. This isn't just a victory, it's a transformation. They'll keep trying to figure out how you did it, but the truth is simple. While they were busy playing dirty, you were mastering the art of being untouchable. And that in itself is the ultimate play they never saw coming. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a moment of real, unfiltered truth. Show some love by liking the video. It helps us reach more people ready to rise above the noise. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your story and how you've outlasted your own battles. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it with them, because strength grows when it's shared. Let's build a community that plays smarter, stands stronger, and wins bigger. Thanks for being here.